Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Monday. Keith Tebow from FRC Media. We've talked about how our conversation's been dominated by COVID, but there's other things that are happening in the world, and we're starting to get ready as we head through the summer for our fall 2020 election campaign. And as we head toward the primary for the city of Fall River, there's not really too many contested races that voters will be deciding on when they go to the polls on September 1st. But one of them is the race for the Massachusetts 4th Congressional District. Congressman Joseph Kennedy, as you may know, deciding not to run for re-election, instead running for the Senate seat against Ed Markey. So we're making a point to speak to all the candidates running in the September 1st primary, and I'm pleased to be joined by one of them right now, Chris Zannetos. Chris is one of the 9 Democrats running for the nomination. Chris, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate the opportunity.
And we appreciate hearing from you as we're trying, again, we're going to listen to all the candidates as we head to the primary. Let me start by asking you, Chris, for people who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to jump into the campaign.
Sure. Thanks, Keith. I appreciate it. So I am a tech and education entrepreneur. This is my first run for elected office. I've started 3 tech companies here in Massachusetts that have created hundreds of jobs, working with a lot of great people. We created those jobs, which created about $250 million of salary for people in Massachusetts. I also founded a nonprofit that brings educational institutions and companies together to create new paths for people to access the growth economy, especially for people from marginalized communities, lower income communities, people of color, veterans. And, my experience around those areas really is what has driven me to run for this office. I actually went to see the then 8 candidates speak back when we could actually get together and in groups. And they're all fine people and they've done some great things. But I really saw a lack of experience around creating jobs, creating good jobs for the 21st century, and how we can change and improve our educational process and system to enable people to access that, particularly without requiring people to have to be able to pay for a 4-year college degree. And as I said, there are very fine people in the race, but their experience generally is all around politics and not in these areas that I think, especially now with the pandemic and our economic disaster that we're in, that we need down in Washington, people who understand how to change the system in a way that creates more opportunity for everyone.
Yeah. So, one of the questions I'm asking all the candidates as well is, there's so many levels to running for Congress, so many different issues, and we'll get on into some of them, obviously, during our conversation today. But is there like one issue that is you're really passionate about, that you really want to get behind if you're elected?
So I'm tempted to say there are multiple issues, but to try to answer your question, fundamentally for me, the driver of my work, both in as an entrepreneur creating businesses in the technology space, but also with my nonprofit, is around opportunity, right? There are so many barriers, so many obstacles that are preventing people of color, people from lower income communities, people from middle income communities from accessing the opportunities of our economy and our country. And some of these are centuries old, and we've finally, I think, seen a groundswell of activity and desire to change embedded racism in many of our institutions, like our policing and justice systems. But we need to go further, because when you look at the obstacles, there's a layer and layer of obstacle preventing people from having the opportunity that, frankly, I did and that my children have had. And that's just not fair. My father was an immigrant. He came here with $100 in his pockets and was able to create this great life with my mother for my family. And I look around now, and 40+% of Americans no longer believe in the American dream of being able to build a better life than the generation before. And to me, that's unacceptable. It's just wrong. And so my focus is on how we can drive social and economic justice to enable everyone to have an opportunity, have a fair chance to build a better life for their families.
I know that as we do these interviews, as I mentioned, we're doing a couple every week over the next few weeks to hope to talk to all 11 candidates, the 9 Democrats and the 2 Republicans. So there may be some issues that may come up in the next couple of weeks that I may not get to you to talk about, but I will with others. But something that obviously has come up in the past month plus, and you just touched upon it, opportunities for those that are disadvantaged, and that leads to the killing of George Floyd and those in the Black community that continue to feel slighted and complaining about the systematic racism that is occurring across the country. Let me just ask you in general terms, what are your thoughts in terms of reforming police, defunding police? What are your thoughts in terms
Sure.
of that aspect of helping out the Black community?
Sure. So one thing I didn't mention is that, what my parents were able to do for me was create an opportunity for me to get a great education. And I was able to go to some great schools and attend MIT, where I graduated. I'm a data person, right? That's what they teach at MIT. And anyone who doesn't believe that we have systemic racism embedded in how we police needs to look at the data, because the data is clear. If a person is stopped by police and is not threatening them, there is a 200 plus greater chance that they're shot by the police if their skin color is black or brown. And that's just one of the areas. So it's clear to me that we have to change how we police. We have to improve training. We have to change some of the procedures like chokeholds that can be used in a way that drives this systemic racism. And I am a believer that the vast majority of our policemen and women try to faithfully fulfill their duties. And one thing that I want to be very clear is I reject the notion that many politicians suggest that you can't both be aggressively driving for social justice in our policing policies and changing how we police, and at the same time respect and acknowledge the service of those policemen and women who faithfully fulfill their duties. I think we can do both. And I think, frankly, those that are faithfully fulfilling their duties, I think are happy for an engagement to help them improve and eliminate the racism that has just been embedded over time in our policies.
Yeah, I want to dovetail into something you did mention in that answer in terms of education. You had the ability and the fortunate ability to get a degree and go to MIT. Some people are not. Fill us in on your philosophy in terms of education and how we can try to lift people up so everyone gets a fair shot at getting a high quality education.
Sure. So I take a step back just for a second, Keith, to say that we've been undergoing a great transformation in our society over the past couple of decades, driven by the change in our economy, the change in the drivers, right? We're not the industrial age anymore. We're the technology and information age. And I think that our institutions have failed to provide leadership. And ultimately, this is why I'm in this race. Our government clearly has with a dysfunctional Congress, but so have our businesses and to some degree our educational system, right? Our businesses build, and including my own, build great opportunity for people who can afford a 4-year college degree. And we're creating a lot of jobs for those folks. In fact, so many that we have 9,000 chronically unfilled cybersecurity jobs, for example, here in Massachusetts, that we can't fill because everyone's looking for 4-year college degree graduates. And on the educational side, the educational system we have was really built for the Industrial Revolution, not for today. I believe that these 3 institutions, government, businesses, and our schools, need to come together and radically change how we prepare our people for the 21st century jobs. And one of those areas is focusing on how we can enable, with apprenticeships and internships, an expanded investment for people to access these great growth jobs that are chronically unfilled with 1 to 2 years of post-secondary, post-high school education. This is why I focused in part my nonprofit on working with Mass Bay Community College and great companies like Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, Steward Healthcare, and State Street Bank to create a pilot program for just that such pathway, right? With apprenticeships, engagement, experiential learning, can we open up the opportunities of the growth economy to everyone, not just those who can afford a four-year college degree? And I do want to stress, when I talk about these opportunities, they're not opportunities that require someone to be a math whiz or a science expert. In my industry, we're beginning to call these new-collar jobs, right? They're jobs that give you an entry into the growth economy in a way that is affordable and effective for people who can't afford a four-year college degree.
So is your thought more of on developing skills instead of, I guess, what would be a traditional, not that there wouldn't be a need for this, a more traditional liberal arts, broad type education for people after their public and high school education? So
look, I do believe in the value of liberal arts as well. Frankly, one of my degrees is political science. So I have one of my degrees is a liberal arts degree. So I do believe in that as well. But we have to recognize and acknowledge the fact that technology is transforming every industry. The Mass High Tech Council here in Massachusetts, on the board of directors, we have the executives from the Patriots and the Celtics. Okay, technology is transforming even our sports industry, retail, insurance. It doesn't matter what industry it is; it's transforming it. And as I said, it's not necessarily creating these jobs where you need to be an engineer, but you need to have an understanding of analytics or an understanding of environmental sciences. And I think that we need to invest in those areas because we know that's the driver of jobs. And that goes for K through 12 education as well. I believe we have to take an approach like we did after we were losing the space race to the Russians prior to my birth. We as a federal government made it a point to massively invest in math and sciences in education to enable us to succeed through the space age.
I want to shift gears right now. With COVID-19, we're seeing more of the inequities in terms of healthcare for many of our people. Obviously, we know that the virus has put a burden on those elderly, but it also appears to be inappropriately or inequitably impacting those minorities in our community. How can we improve healthcare to make sure that, in terms of not only accessing healthcare, but also making sure that people get treatment on an equitable basis?
Yeah. So this is when I mentioned earlier about these layers and layers of obstacles. These are some of those obstacles, right? A lot of our people are frustrated and they're disenfranchised and they're angry, and I think they're right to be so, because it seems like they're continually put behind these barriers to be able to build a great life and a better life for their families. And healthcare is clearly one of those. People of color, communities of lower income have been harder hit by COVID for a number of reasons. One is access to healthcare, right? So we have to redouble our efforts to make sure that everyone has access to quality health insurance. And not only quality health insurance, but access to the actual quality services. In, unfortunately, many of our communities, not necessarily the ones in the leafy suburbs, we see it's hard for people to actually get to healthcare services. They have to take multiple buses. They have to switch lines to get there. It's a burden, and it makes it harder for them to actually access the services. In addition, for many of our middle and lower income communities, many of these folks are essential workers. And it's interesting that COVID has clarified, truly what is essential and what isn't. But the fact is, while we're now calling people essential workers, the system doesn't treat them that way. And part of what we need to do is ensure that everyone has effective quality healthcare coverage, which I support via expanding Obamacare, delivering on its promise, and ensuring that we have a public option that everyone can access and that it provides a safety net for those who can't afford it, and that we open up competition by enabling Medicare to actually go drive its own agreements around drug prices.
Right. You know, as we head into the fall, and a lot more has been made even before COVID about, even though, you know, people will say, well, the economy's been good, lowest unemployment rate, there's still those, you know, income inequities that we have seen, imbalances over the years. I know that on your website, you're calling for, you know, a $15 minimum wage. Talk about what other ways you would see opportunities as a congressman to, again, help bridge that divide between incomes between the haves and the have-nots.
Sure, and that is a huge underlying issue. And you're absolutely right. It was with us before the pandemic, and it will be with us after. And frankly, many of its impacts are being exacerbated over the course of the pandemic. Right. So for the past 10 years, we've had the best economic expansion, at least of my lifetime. But at the same time, our huge opportunity and income gap only grew. Right. We've built an economy, structured an economy in a way that continually drives value to the people at the top and not to everyone else. So, one, I believe we need to change that by making this massive investment in education that I mentioned. I think that is a key driver. And education that includes retraining and the ability for people who already have a job to retrain through community colleges at night and online to access better jobs. But as well, there are many other things that we have to do. Improve healthcare as a way to help people bridge this divide. Another way is for us to invest in transportation, right? In public transportation and affordable housing, so that people can get better access to jobs, they can be closer to their jobs. And by the way, they can also, by reducing commuting, help improve the climate where we have an absolute crisis.
And you've actually led into my next question. I know that I believe today, or in the past few days, you've released your plan in terms of how the country can better cooperate in quelling climate change. How can we do that, and how would you propose that we do that?
Sure. So I'll step back to the pandemic again for a second. So we have had this just massive healthcare crisis, which has been followed by a massive economic crisis. Right now, our federal government is printing money to ensure that our people can feed their families, they can clothe their families and have shelter, and that is the right thing to do. But we're not going to print our way out of this mess. We have to get back to growth, and we've got to deliver solutions that make 1 + 1 = 3. We've got to invest in ways where we get a stronger return. Right? This is what I've learned as an entrepreneur and what I've done with my businesses and with my nonprofit. Bring people together to solve tough challenges in a way that everybody wins. Climate gives us that opportunity. We can invest in climate change technologies and businesses and jobs in a way that improves life for our people, like investing in public transportation will reduce emissions, create construction jobs, and improve the quality of life for our people. But in addition, we know that there are going to be some growth industries. In fact, we're working to build a wind farm right off of our district, off the coast. Well, every single one of those wind turbines for use in that wind farm are going to be imported from Europe because we don't have an industry here in the United States. I'd like to make our district the leader and help make the United States the leader in the growth industries around clean energy, remediation, and conservation, which will create jobs, but also help us improve the environment and start fixing some of these climate problems that we have.
You know, a lot of people, when they vote for Congress, a lot of time it's these domestic issues that people tend to vote on because it impacts them personally. However, as a member of Congress, foreign policy is going to be another issue that you're going to have to deal with if elected. What is your general view on how the United States currently handles its foreign policy, and what are your comments in terms of how we can do some things better?
Sure. Well, you might not be surprised that I don't think we handle our foreign policy very well here. I actually think that our country is stronger. Our national security is stronger when we promote and help drive democracy and equality throughout the world. It pains me to see our government, led by President Trump, cozy up to dictators and dismiss and avoid working with our Democratic allies. We should be investing heavily in our time and efforts to build up our alliances and leverage our alliances with countries that support the same and aspire to deliver the same value to their citizens as we do: equal opportunity, justice, and liberty. Now, we're all trying to get there, but I do believe if we focus on those, building those alliances, we will be stronger. I would be remiss if I didn't add that we've got to recognize that cyber is the battlefield of the 21st century. And certainly, I've been working in cybersecurity for 20 years. I've gone down to Congress to brief senators and congressmen and women on it. I know this area very well, and there's a lot that we have to do. I could take up a whole hour just talking about cyber issues that we've got to deal with.
I want to get now to the nuts and bolts of the campaign and voting itself. What are your thoughts about efforts in the face of COVID to have it easier for voters to cast their ballot, either through mail ballot? There is some, early voting that has been going on, or that will go on rather, as we head to the election this fall. What are ways you feel we should be able to make it easier for people to participate in the process?
So, first of all, I believe that we should make our democracy as accessible as possible to our people. So I am supportive of vote by mail. I don't know what's exactly going to come out of Beacon Hill on the topic, but I do believe that they understand that we've got to enable our people to access democracy as effectively as possible all the time, but especially now in a pandemic. I have some neighbors who are over 80, and or in the neighborhood, we have sort of refused to let them leave their houses. The neighborhood does all their shopping for them. They're just beginning to get out now, but I can understand how people who are elderly or people with small children may be very worried about going to the voting booth, even in September and November. And I think our job, or the job certainly on Beacon Hill, is to make that as easy as possible. And I think certainly voting by mail, the absentee ballot process, making that more accessible is a huge part to achieve that.
I apologize. How difficult has it been for you to get out and campaign without the interaction that candidates normally have in meeting people? This is the time of year where there's a lot of festivals and group gatherings where you can shake hands with a lot of voters. How difficult has it been to sort of campaign differently?
So I made my decision to run on, I think it was February 21st, before the pandemic hit us and before we really understood the implications and how ill prepared we were. And certainly it has not played out as I had expected when I made that decision. But it gives us an opportunity to try some other creative things. So, one of the things that we're doing in my campaign is we're running webinars to make sure that our people in the district understand the great services and great organizations that can help them in the district, like Neighbor Brigade, which is a group, an organic nonprofit that is in, I think, 7 or 8 towns in our district, where neighbors help each other through periods of crisis. So it's been a great opportunity to use the web to do that. But in addition, I've been riding my bike through every town and every city in the district, including Fall River, as I mentioned to you earlier, Keith, a couple of weeks ago. And it's a great opportunity at a very responsible social distance to meet people. Right. I've met a lot of local families that own restaurants or cafes or other stores, and I've been able to hear what concerns them, what their hopes and dreams are, but also what the challenges that they've been facing, so I can understand what I should do if I'm honored to be the representative for that.
Yeah. Let me ask you, people, along with their personal situations, one of the things that we hear a lot, and we've heard for quite some time now, is the partisanship that takes place in Congress. As one member of 435, how can you help bridge that divide if elected?
Yeah, so that's great. So I'm not naive enough to believe one person can change that sort of institution. But I do believe that there are good people down there who are working together, like the Problem Solvers Caucus, like Congressman Kilmer from Washington, who brings 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans together every Saturday for breakfast. And that's what I would try to do as well. I hate the thought of leaving this hyper-partisan, dysfunctional Congress to my children as our legacy, and I will work extremely hard to change that. Now, I bring an entrepreneur's mindset to this. We are a little crazy. We think we can build something from nothing, and we can build something that gives value to the community, our staff, our customers, our investors. Win-wins. So that's the approach that I would bring down to Washington. That's, just to give you a quick example, that's what I've done with my nonprofit with Mass Bay Community College. I've convinced State Street and Harvard Pilgrim and others to invest $500,000 in this pilot program because they see the opportunity to build a pipeline of people that they can hire. Now, they didn't come together organically with Mass Bay. They had to have someone bring them together, explain the connection, and create the win-win. That's what I do. That's what I'll do down there. And hopefully we can get a tipping point, a critical mass of people doing that down there.
Right. As we head to the primary, the 9 Democrats in the race reside in 3 communities, Brookline, Newton, and Wellesley. How do you bridge any disconnect that may happen between all of you up in that area, the northern part of the district, and people saying in a city like Fall River, where, you know, some people may see, well, that person doesn't represent me. How do you bridge that disconnect?
Sure. So first of all, that just pains me to hear that people might think that the representative doesn't represent them. And that would be something that I would work very hard to make sure that we changed. I think there are a couple of ways. One is it's really important for us to spend time outside of our own towns. I was actually down in Fall River last week meeting with Mayor Coogan, meeting with Rob Correa, the principal of Resiliency Prep, and I'll be down many, many more times in Fall River to listen, to engage, and to help build some ideas for how we can enable our people to progress and to get these new paths to a better life for their families, because ultimately that's what we all want. So I think part of it is, the candidates need to engage, but I think also we've got to look at their past experiences. And my nonprofit has worked primarily with communities similar to Fall River, and I've learned a lot from that, and that really is what drives my passion to help eliminate these obstacles we talked about.
Finally, Chris, how can people find out more about your campaign if they want to learn more about what you offer to the people of the 4th Congressional District?
Thanks, Keith. So you can tell I'm a first-time politician because I haven't been peppering that throughout here. But so thank you for the prompt. But people can find out more about my positions and how they can help at chrisz for ma.com. So Chris Z as in Zannetos for Massachusetts.com. And we have a lot of interns on board. We've got a lot of opportunities as we continue to build our campaign for people to help. I would just love the engagement. I want to hear from people. You can always send me an email at chris at zannetosforcongress.com or just click on the info on our website because I want to understand what people want to see from their next representative.
Chris Zannetos, Democrat running for the Massachusetts 4th Congressional District. Thank you for your time and speaking to the people of Fall River, and all the best. Hopefully we can talk again soon.
Thank you, Keith, and thanks for this service that you're providing to the community to enable them to hear all of us. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you for joining us today as we are listening to all the candidates running in the 4th District over the next few weeks. I'm Keith Tebow. Have a great rest of your day.